why drones, the advantages for using them in infrared, key applications and industries, operational best practices as far as flight planning and data capture. As far as images and pictures and stuff like that, they're cool. What does that mean as far as data analysis and deliverables for your business, and different resources, next steps, and then just want to go over, open it up for questions and comments at the end. Like I said, this is partnered and empowered by Blue Falcon Aerial. I'm there. Well, we'll go through that. But at the end, learning objectives for today is basically be able to define what infrared thermography is and some of the basic principles. Identify common misconceptions about thermal. Recognize different types of thermal anomalies, like, okay, what are the differences in this picture and what does that actually mean? Explaining some of the advantages of using drones versus the status quo or the in-person setup right now. Key industries that are utilizing drone-based thermography right now, and describe best practices for planning and executing UAS thermal missions. Last, understand how thermal data translates into actionable reports for your clients. So a little bit about myself, who am I, what's my background? My business is CG Drones. Again, I work under Blue Falcon Aerial as their VP of infrared, thermal, and solar analytics, their operations and all that kind of stuff. I got a lot of my education in drones and imagery from the Army. I was a satellite and drone imagery analyst too many years ago to count, but 15 years ago. And so I did a lot of work with LiDAR, infrared, electro-optical, radio wave, you name it. And we had a lot of different applications, mostly military, and so, some of those have translated over to civilian applications. Then after the military, I wanted to do something that mattered, and it wasn't just numbers or banking and stuff like that. I had a couple of those different jobs. Found a company called Solar City, and was getting to be able to be helpful one house at a time as far as solar. And I also saw that the CEOs were cousins of Elon, and Tesla was going to buy them out anyway, which ended up happening. So between 5 years of working with Tesla and Solar City, and then 5 years down here in Jacksonville working for a solar installer company local here, being their sales manager, I focus a lot on solar. And my biggest why is trying to fix the industry with maintenance and data and the long-term taking care of solar, because right now there isn't any of that. Drones and thermography can definitely help, and we'll talk about some of the occurrences that are already existing. Any questions so far? Okay. And Meyer, can you just keep an eye on the chat so that if there are any questions, you can filter them? Okay. What is infrared thermography? This is just the basics, the science, the sciencey stuff. It's seeing the invisible, but we're talking about heat. Okay. Thermography is the science of detecting and measuring infrared energy emitted from objects. Everything above absolute zero, which is negative 273 degrees Celsius or negative 459 degrees Fahrenheit, emits infrared energy. So your laws of thermal diffusion and all that kind of stuff, you have heat and it dissipates to cold. So thermal cameras can detect this energy and translate that into a visual image, a thermogram, where different colors or shades represent different temperatures. So the image that we're seeing really isn't a picture like what we're used to looking at. It is a graph of what are the different colors in each pixel. Basically, think of a camera that sees heat instead of visible light. Now, sciencey bit, we have light, and it is a wavelength, and there are different wavelengths. We are used to talking about and seeing the visible spectrum. So from purple to red, it is literally within this little section right here. That's it. That's all we can see out of the full electromagnetic spectrum. We also have microwaves. We have radio waves. We both know about those. Radio waves are a lot further apart, slower on the frequency. Okay, so they can travel further distances with a lot less energy. Microwaves, they have a little bit faster energy, faster wavelengths, and that's what we use to heat up different foods by exciting the electrons and the atoms inside the thing that we're putting into the microwave. So don't put yourself in there. Infrared, okay, is everything from microwave to red, okay, as far as the visible light spectrum. And so we have near infrared, we have far infrared, there's different spectrums there. And then there's ultraviolet, your UVs. Okay, so when you have your UV light, you can see stuff on, and like different liquids and stuff like that that are left over that you can't see with the naked eye. And X-rays, that's where, like going into the hospital. And gamma rays, you're dead. There's just so much energy there. There's not really a lot of safe aspects that humans will be able to work with gamma rays and survive. So any questions on that, let me know. And otherwise, we'll move forward. Okay. Different industries that we can talk about as far as thermal imaging, roofing. We can see different anomalies in water ingress, in ventilation, in insulation, if they're missing insulation. Home inspection as well. So the exterior walls and stuff like that, you're going to be able to see if there's any missing ventilation on the ceilings. You're going to be able to see if there's any water leaks from the roof or the floor above. Building diagnostics, this is mostly like your electrical systems inside the walls and gas or any of the utilities going through. That way you can, and HVAC as well. Okay. Agricultural, you can see different hotspots and vegetation growth over fields of vegetation. It's good for farming and ag. I do not have a lot of experience with the agricultural side, so I'm going to, if somebody does have agricultural experience, definitely raise your hand. And if you want to kind of, Michael, okay. If you want to give any kind of background of how infrared is used versus multispectral, that'd be great. But yeah, definitely. Solar panels and utility, I would definitely pair these two together with the electrical side of things. With solar, you're looking for hot spots because where solar panels are absorbing the infrared or the light spectrums from the sun, if it's not dissipating that in electricity, it's absorbing it and heating up. So when you have hot spots, that's not good for electricity or solar. Same thing with the utility side of things. When you have a lot of electricity bunched up in one area, like a transformer or a fuse or a switch, and you see a huge hot spot, usually right after that, it's going to probably arc, or there's going to be an issue soon where the utility is going to want to come out and fix that line before, say, the next one. Fire. Infrared is very, very good for fire detection, fire scene analysis, and seeing where fires started, where they like how they, if you're actually there and you can see a video how the fire went through the building or structure, and then also search and rescue for people, for pets, different kind of applications. And then on the right here, I have another graph of how the electromagnetic spectrum is, and we have your visible light right here in the middle, and then your infrared and your UV below that. Mike, I think it was Mike Carson. Did you want to say anything as far as the agricultural side?
Yeah, hey Chris, how's it going?
Good.
I have a few different experiences with thermal stuff, but I'll just like mention two quick things with the agriculture stuff. Is one is basically with irrigation and lines, and that's a big one also in like the golf industry as well. But agriculture is a huge one for that, for analyzing lines and irrigation. The other one is actually crop health around analyzing anything from leaf temperature to even bugs and thermal types of bugs. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what that image is actually focusing on, is those hot spots across the field versus your water irrigation. I definitely I can tell where that would be helpful, because water is very easy to distinguish between your normal stuff that you see on thermal.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else have questions before we move on? Okay. So what I also want to go over is what infrared thermography is not. Okay, it's not X-rays. So these are some of your common misconceptions that people think. Okay, it's not an X-ray vision. You can't see through solid objects. You can see heat below solid objects depending on how well it transfers the heat from one layer to another layer, but it's not like an X-ray vision where you can see through walls or glass or anything like that. So most of this is going to be surface temperature. Okay, you can see heat transferring through a material if it changes the surface temperature. So, for example, in roofing, a TPO or thermo rolled rubber roof is going to have a very consistent temperature, and at night after the sun goes down, the TPO roof membrane is going to lose heat to the outside elements faster than water. Water will retain the heat longer, and if there's water below the surface of the roof, water intrusion or water pooling or anything like that, you're going to see a hot spot in that section of roofing, which would indicate the potential or a possible water intrusion, and you'd want to have a roofer go out there and do a physical test to confirm. But then you can actually see all those issues ahead of time without being destructive to the entire roof. So it is also not strictly temperature measurements. Okay, you have to. There are caveats to how this is taking the measurements. So it does measure temperature, but your accuracy depends heavily on what are the settings of where you're at and how you're taking the picture. Emissivity, or the ability for that surface to emit heat, reflected temperatures from, say, the sun reflecting off of the surface, distance from the camera to the actual surface, and different atmospheric conditions like fog or rain or stuff like that, or wind. There's different ways of using thermal imagery. There's qualitative and there's quantitative. Okay, so when you're using qualitative, you're finding differences. more than quantitative, where you're actually looking for exact degrees. Okay, so it's a fundamental part of it, but it's very critical to understand the differences. So like you can take a thermal camera to say your car brakes after you've gone really hard on the highway, and you can see the temperature of the brakes at one spot. That's your quantitative version. But if you look at the whole image over the entire wheel and your front quarter panel, that is more on the qualitative side, so that you can see, okay, your front quarter panel and your tires and your rim are a lot less hot than, say, the brakes and the calipers. So that's where the thermal differences are. The reason I say that is because if you have a different range, say you're only looking at 60 degrees through 150 degrees, your brake caliper and all that may not even show up because it's not in that thermal range. And it's not night vision. You can see a lot of things at night that you can't see with infrared, with RGB and electro-optical. But night vision is amplifying what's out there with ambient light, your moonlight with very low emission light, or even with infrared light. But thermography detects emitted heat, so it doesn't require an external light source. And some of our advanced systems out there, you'll see scopes that have night vision, but then also integrate thermal so that you can kind of see a hot spot out in the night, like trees and stuff like that. So different examples. Infrared is going to be this top left one, where you have cold is going to be your darker purples, reds, or black versus white. On that, you can flip black and white, where black is cold and white is hot, vice versa. There are different color palettes. Night vision would be the one on the right, where you have usually a green tint, and you have amplified the surroundings by, say, the moon up top or different light sources there. X-ray is down at the bottom left, and that's where you have the ability to see like different densities with bone versus skin and see through things. This one on the top right is kind of a mix between the night vision and your thermal, because you can see some of the heat emitting off of the person and off of the gun barrel. So here is another example, and this is from Infrared Training Center visual. And the image that we're looking at is the same image, just different sensors. Okay, it's a cool cup and a hot cup, and in front of it is a piece of glass. Okay, so in the visible light, you can't really see the glass. You can see the two cups, but you can't see which one is hot and which one is cold. In the middle, you have night vision. It amplifies a small amount of the visible light, requires some light, moonlight or LED light, and you don't see the glass either. On the thermal image, you can see that the left cup is cold, the right cup is hot. You have your scale from 47 degrees to 111 degrees. And then in the front, there is a glass pane that you can't see through, because it's not, the heat isn't touching the glass, so it's not being emitted through the glass. So that is a really good thing to take a note of, that you're not going to be able to see through glass with thermal. So a couple key concepts of infrared thermal and thermography. Understanding what influences the images is very critical. Emissivity, I already brought this up, but basically what is it? It's the efficiency, or how efficiently a surface emits thermal energy, a scale of 1 to 10. Dull, dark surfaces usually have higher emitters, like 0.95, say, like a black roof or a dark gray roof. Shiny surfaces are low emitters, more reflective. And this is critical for your quantitative accuracy versus qualitative. Reflectivity. Shiny surfaces can reflect infrared energy from other objects like the sun or your own body heat. So if you're standing next to or in front of a pane of glass and the glass is here, but the camera is here and you're over here, it could probably see your heat reflection in the glass. But that is a reflectivity and not emissivity. So knowing the difference between the two is going to help reduce potential false hot and cold spots, knowing what you're looking at. Here is an example of a lot of that all in one picture. Okay. As far as emissivity, you have a couple down here where you have the roof overhang, where you have a little bit less of the thermal enclosure below it, whereas over here you have a lot more of an enclosure underneath it with the building underneath. And this is a very shiny, so you have glass and you have metal, so you have a higher reflectivity closer to the angle of where the sun is coming from. So this hot spot right here is due to the sun reflecting off of the solar panels, whereas these hot spots are due to emissivity and the issues of thermal anomalies that we can see on these broken solar panels. Same thing with the truck at the bottom. You can see on this side, the black surface is where they welded shut the roof of the truck because they hit a bridge. So the black is holding in and holding on to the heat a lot more than the white shiny surfaces. And you can even see the same thing with the ground and the tile below that. So you can see a whole bunch of different levels of what will hold heat, what will be cold versus hot. You have different levels of the same material, your roof, and where you have insulation underneath it versus not. And then you have different levels of your solar panel, like electrical anomalies versus what's not anomalies and you have to be aware of, like the reflectivity versus all of these different issues that are here. I can see about 4 or 5 different anomalies that are happening just in these two solar panels. So that's a good part to kind of stop and get a good grasp of like questions or anything like that. Does anybody see anything that stands up out to them or they want to ask about these two images? It's the same spot, same time frame, just RGB versus or visible versus thermal. Go ahead, Gerald.
Hey, Chris. Just kind of interested to know what those darker areas on. It's very uniformly distributed on the bottom edge of each panel. Just curious about what that might be.
These right here.
Yeah.
So basically, what I can gather is these lines right here are the two rails underneath the solar panels. There is the inverter underneath each of the solar panels here. So this is probably just a little bit of a figment of the differences between this roof underneath it and this roof underneath it. This one is reflecting and being a lot hotter. So right past this rail, it looks a little bit cooler because you have the cooler roof. and underneath this side and up here, it's hotter. You can see a little bit of the same thing here with the rail and the rail, but the sections are very, very similar. The other portion of that, and you can kind of see with the hot spot, it's the opposite. The hot spot is where a solar panel is not working, but that's also where the electricity goes from one to the next when it collects all of it and then basically goes to the next one. So what this may also be is that the bottom row is pushing off enough electricity to give it a degree of cooler temperature at that on that row. Most likely it's the first part. Somebody else had their hand raised, so I didn't see it, but go ahead. Anybody else with a question or anything like that?
Well, I'll throw another one at you, Chris.
Okay.
So this goes back to the slide where you had the two glasses of water, one hot, one cold, and you explained to us earlier that that in the case where you had the disc brakes, if that temperature wasn't within the scale, you wouldn't see it. So let's say, for example, that hot water was 220 degrees, but our scale's only going to 111. What would we be seeing there?
Depends on the sensor on your camera. So when I do that for search and rescue in my on my thermal camera on the remote, I will see the color palette inside of that range. Everything else will be either gray or black, depending on if it's higher or lower than that temperature range. So the reason I would do that for that is, like, say, if I'm looking for a lost dog and it's the middle of the evening, if I set the temperature range from 60 degrees Fahrenheit to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to eliminate a lot of the ground. I'm going to eliminate a lot of the vegetation and the water at night. And then basically that'll all be white or black or a shade of gray. And then it will highlight whichever palette that I have on that temperature range. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Great explanation on both questions. Thank you.
Appreciate it, definitely. Anybody else on questions before we move on? Okay. So a couple of the key concepts, we talked about this already, but let's kind of dive in a little bit more. Understanding what influences the images. Okay. Your qualitative versus quantitative. Looking for differences in temperature, hot or cold spots. Primary use for many, or this is the primary use for many drone inspection scenarios, is just seeing differences in temperature from one spot to the other spot. If you have a surface that is the same surface and then you have thermal differences, there's a reason for that. So that's basically what we're looking for, is if it should all look the same, it should all look the same. And if it doesn't, why? Quantitative is actually measuring actual temperatures. Okay. You have to have very careful setup. You have to have a lot of control over the variables, like we talked about earlier, like the distance, air, wind speed, your environmental compensation for like weather, and you have to know the emissivity of the surface that you're looking at. Okay, so I put a little label there, the caveat that this is where you really want to go into a level 1 certification to understand this fully. So we kind of went over this a little bit already, but I would just want to kind of reiterate, why is it a benefit for the drone versus doing it handheld. Okay. And we'll get to this with like the case study I have at the end, but with say solar systems, you have utility scale solar systems where you have fields and fields and fields of solar. Each of these solar panels, okay, you can see a couple little different hot spots, but if you have a massive field of solar, you're talking about 10,000, 20,000 or more solar panels, maybe 100,000 solar panels. That would take you months, a team of people, months with a FLIR infrared camera to go around and document all of these issues. Drones can do a field of solar in minutes to hours, like not very long at all, and be more accurate because you have a lot more control over consistency throughout the entire scan. So what are thermal anomalies? An anomaly is a difference, okay, or something that is not normal, a deviation from a normal or expected pattern, in this case, thermal. This is often indicates a potential issue. Hotspots, areas of significantly warmer than their surroundings. What we mean by that is if it's like a degree or two, that's not a very big difference, and there are too many variables that could cause that just on 1 or 2 degrees from one spot to another. But if you have a 10-degree or more difference in from like one location, and then this location is completely like 10, 15 or more degrees hotter, you're going to see that, and that's going to be a significant thing to report, because you could see failing electrical before it causes a fire. You could see water ingress before, or an active roof leak in the summer, because water holds up the heat longer, or like a malfunctioning solar panel or solar cell, and that would guarantee the production that people were told and proposed at the beginning. If it's not working, then it's not going to produce the power that it was promised. Cold spots, areas of can significantly cooler than the surrounding areas. Okay, moisture evaporation. Okay, when you have dew in the morning, or if you look at water during the day, water is going to be almost black. It's going to be the coldest thing usually on your thermal image during the day. But at night, it's usually one of the hotter things, because it holds the water water holds the heat longer into the night. You can also see insulation gaps in winter, and you can also see gas leaks, depending on the ambient temperature of the air versus the gas that is being expelled. Usually under pressure, when you expel the gas, it will make the tank cool down. Also, unexpected shapes or distribution of temperature, subsurface moisture spread, and delaminations of different layers of roofing can be noticeable. So this is 2 different locations, but it's the same thing. So on the left-hand side, the flag is being held outside in direct sunlight. And you can also tell that the blue background is absorbing more sun radiation and heat. The red stripes are also absorbing a lot more heat. And the white is the purple, the cooler temperature. All the same fabric, just different colors. So you're absorbing different heat from the sun. Now on the right, same thing, same flag being held up inside. You can't see any of the flag or the colors or the stripes because there's no sun hitting the different colors and warming them up at different rates. Everything is the same temperature. Pretty cool. You can also see cold spots. So this is a really, really cool thing. Now, I mean, as far as what I'm looking at here, this is negative 11 degrees to 25 degrees. But they're making snow. And the funniest part is the part that where they're making the snow is the hottest part of the surrounding because there's so much thermal friction and the energy to push all of that water and disperse it out into the air is actually causing a lot of heat and friction versus the snow or surrounding. So why should we use small UASs, drones for thermography? Basically, we're talking about the synergy of flight and sight. Okay. Efficiency, you can cover vast areas, solar farms, roofs, fields quickly. And also, like comparatively to being on foot, a lot more efficiently. Safety, you can inspect dangerous areas or like say roofs, tall structures, electrical, even if it's energized, you don't want to be touching that with a human. Okay. You can be close to, say, a fire accident or say a gas leak without having to have respiratory. Optimal perspective. A lot of times you can set the gimbal angle to be directly perpendicular to your surface, roof or solar or whatever it is. You want to be perpendicular. When you're doing that on foot, it's not always the easiest to do or guarantee that every single one is going to be the same angle. Cost effectiveness, obviously we've already talked about this, versus doing it on a manned aircraft, not as cost effective because that's more expensive, and we're going to have better data because we're closer. Scaffolding or lifts or doing this for inspection with manned people, anytime you put a human up in the air, your insurance is going to be a factor of probably 7 to 10 fold versus just doing the same insurance for a drone because you're not putting a human up in the air. And then data quality and repeatability, because it's doing the same flight, same speed, same angle and altitude for all of your photos. It's really easier for the systems and analysis to do overlap and your time lapse and analyses. So a couple things that you need to know as far as the tools of the trade, thermal payloads that are out there and different options, integrated systems versus interchangeable payloads. Your integrated systems are going to be the drone and the camera as one unit. That's what I have. I have the DJI Mavic 3. We have the Matrice 4T that just came out, and there's the Matrice 30T. I didn't put it on here, but there is also the Mavic Pro 2, I believe, had a thermal camera, but your resolution was not as good. It was a 320 over 256 versus the 640, and we'll talk about it at the bottom. This is very simple to operate versus your interchangeable payloads. Most people that know how to fly drones can pick up a Mavic 3T and fly it. Interchangeable payloads, larger drones with dedicated thermal gimbals like the Matrice 300 or 350 RTK, plus say the Zenmoose HT20 or HTN. These will have higher resolutions and flexibility for visible versus infrared capabilities, but that's really based off of the application that you're putting it towards. So if you're doing gas detection and you need like near infrared or a specific spectrum, that might be better for an interchangeable payload system where you have like the Matrice 300, and then you can take off the Zenmuse and do a different camera if you need to. Key specs to understand are your thermal sensor resolution, like what we just talked about. Obviously, we're all used to 1080 versus 4K, which is 2160. With thermal, we have on the Mavic 3T and the Matrice 4T, you have a 640 by 512. That's definitely better than the 320 by 256. More pixels equals more detail. Duh. Thermal sensitivity. NETD. The lower, the better. And I had to look this up, so I put the acronym out underneath, and it's basically your noise equivalent temperature difference. And basically on the picture at the bottom, you can see 25 MK versus 80 MK. The 80 MK is a little bit fuzzier. It's not as clear as the 25 MK. So the lower the number for your net TD or net D is going to be better for your imagery. Why is this all important? You can take the thermal images, awesome, cool. The applications, how are you using this? That's what's going to be effective, meaningful, and valuable for your client, okay? Where are drones making differences? What industries are we talking about? Building an envelope and roofing, detecting moisture intrusion after the build, insulation deficiencies, air leaks, okay? Timing relative to the time of day, okay? So if you're looking for moisture intrusion, you want to do that typically at night after sunset. If you're looking for insulation deficiencies, usually that's done more in the morning before sunrise to see the heat leaving the building. Okay. Public safety, search and rescue. I kind of talked about this already. I help out with LP SARTA, which is the Lost Pet Search and Rescue Drone Association. It's a nationwide advocacy, basically to help find pets and stuff like that. But there's also been times where local law enforcement has reached out because they're not allowed to use DJI here. So they go, hey, you got a better drone than we do. Can you come out and help find a missing person? Definitely. I want to make sure that somebody, if somebody is missing and can be found, we are definitely bringing them back as safe as possible. The biggest thing there is you can cover a wider area faster and more efficiently versus just boots on the ground. Accident and fire scene mapping, hot spots and perimeters, even in a dangerous area, you can do a lot more analytics and data detailed gathering with drones versus somebody on the ground, especially if it's a hot spot like a fire or hazardous area. They're going to have to wait, and time is critical. Public safety as well, surveillance. Obviously, we've all seen cameras popping up all over the place, but some of them are not visual cameras. Some of them are infrared cameras and can see what you think you're hiding from. You may not be hiding from, because they can see the heat coming off your butt, figuratively and literally. Agricultural, we talked about this a little bit already. Monitoring crop health, irrigation, livestock counting and monitoring. Looking for illnesses in livestock. If there's a temperature difference, that may also be something that they're using for the bird population right now. Industrial, inspecting tank levels. If you have a lot of, like for ports, you have a lot of oil and crude and natural gas coming into ports. You have these big old tanks. You can actually see which tanks are full, which ones are half full, and which ones are empty, because the liquid inside of it is going to hold heat differently than just air. Also, like your flare stacks where they have venting and or just gas and or a fire stack that is venting. And then on the electrical side of things, I put this on a separate slide. Your solar farm inspections, commercial level and residential level all fall under solar inspections. What is beneficial here, you do have monitoring with solar systems, but a lot of times it's on a string or a bunch of solar panels, not necessarily each and every solar panel. So if there's one that's messed up, it's going to affect a whole bunch of them. And then you're looking at changing out or repairing an entire section of solar panels. Whereas the drone can say, okay, not just that panel, but this cell is the problem. So we're going to take out this solar panel and put in another solar panel, and that's a lot easier than doing the entire string. Below a single solar panel, the different levels, you have cells, you have diodes, a bunch of solar panels put together are strings, and then you have combiner boxes to take different strings and combine those together into large electrical loads. And then they have the transmission, and that's where you're going to go into the utilities and electrical side, where you can have substations, transmission or T&D. Do we have anybody on the call that has done a lot of utility or line inspection, transmission, T&D experience? Okay. Same with kind of cell towers. You can inspect the cell towers for hot spots. If you have hot spots in electrical wiring, that's a major problem. And the utility company is going to want to repair that without the electricity on before there is a fire or a transformer blows and causes a wildfire, which would be a much bigger issue. Not saying anything about certain ones that may or may not have happened recently. But then also this enhances your safety and is a preventative maintenance overall. So you're saving a lot more money by doing this maintenance versus not. Before we get into like planning and flight path and all that kind of stuff, does anybody have any industry specific experience that they want to talk about or questions that they have? Yeah, I think I put everybody to sleep. Awesome. Yep. It's the monotone, I know. So basically, for your best practices, you want to make sure that you're planning ahead of time, 7 Ps, from the military. You know, prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So how you set this up is going to be critical to the analytics and the deliverable that you are providing. So you want to make sure that you define the mission. What anomalies are you looking for? This will drive what settings, what altitude, and also what time of day. Environmental conditions, time of day, avoid high solar loading reflections. Basically, if you have a metal roof and you're trying to do a very low slope or flat metal roof, and you try to do that flight in the middle of the day, like 11 to 1 o'clock, basically every single one of your photos is going to have the sun reflected off the metal roof and right back into the drone. So you're not going to see anything. You'll see a lot of hot spot from the sun. Early morning versus after sunset is often best, depending on what you're looking for. Solar loading, as far as solar panels during the day, is better. So for I believe the Autel 640T does have a 640 by 512 resolution. That's why it's named that way, and would be very equal to the DJI Mavic 3T. The only thing I would say would be considerable difference is if you have the RTK hat or module on the M3T, then you're going to have a lot more accuracy on the orthomosaic geo-referenced data. But Autel is just as good. Yes. I'm going to reserve any comments or opinions about Skydio. We're not going to talk about that one. You can. All right. So let's kind of go back with the time of day, because I said it matters, but at the same time, what you're looking for is going to determine what time of day you're going to fly. If you're looking for insulation issues, roofing, and or the exterior of a house kind of or building envelope, that's going to be more of your before sunrise, and that's going to be more of your morning stuff. If you're looking for solar panel issues, a lot of times they want you to do 11 a.m. to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And there's actually a tool called a solar meter that will measure how much sun. I have mine in the car. How much sun is actually out. So if it's super cloudy, you don't want to do it. You want to make sure that you have a very high solar reading, and you're inspecting the solar panels during solar noon, so that you can say, okay, the most power, the most energy was on the solar panels at that time of day. If you're looking for water ingress, penetration, stuff like that, leaks for roofs and those kind of issues, or if you're doing search and rescue, a lot of times late at night or after sunset specifically is going to be the best time to do that. Wind can cause a lot of convective cooling in between the surface and the drone, or it can do a lot of convective cooling to your surface itself. Okay, so if you're flying at 200 feet versus a roof at 20 feet, there's a lot of distance between your drone and the roof. And if you had, same as like the birds use the convection currents to rise up and then coast further, same thing with your thermal wind patterns, okay, that can affect your data, your imagery. Other side of that is if you're looking at surfaces and then you have a lot of winds on one side of the building, and then you have a building here, and then this side of the building is all blocked from the winds, you're going to have differences in the thermal cooling where there's a lot of wind versus where there's not a lot of wind. If you don't notice that, or if you're not aware of that, that can affect both your imagery as far as like where are different hot spots and stuff like that, but it can also affect, as you're flying, how the drone, how stable it is. So preferably the lowest amount of wind is the best. Under 10 miles an hour is best. Also, cloud coverage. Overcast is often ideal for roofing and surface inspections, except for solar. We want the sun to be out to charge up or power up the solar panels. So again, it's what are you looking for is going to determine when are you going to look. Also, planning on the planning side, weather specifically, if it's foggy, if there's precipitation, if it's raining, if there's snow, don't fly. You're not going to get effective imagery. There's too much stuff in between particles, fog, that have temperature differences versus the subject or the surface that you're looking for. Next thing, altitude and speed. You want to actually be closer and slower to get the best detail and resolution. So I know higher and faster is going to get you a lot more coverage. It's better for, say, search and rescue and stuff like that. But if you're looking for inspections, roofs, solar, gas, all that kind of stuff, it's not about coverage. It's about detail and precision. That's when you're going to go with lower and slower. If you're looking at like search and rescue and trying to find something, you want to cover vast areas fast, but then you want to focus down on little spots. You can be higher and faster in those situations. Again, don't go over 400 feet. We know why. Overlap, use automated flight planning software. Like I use the Pilot app a lot versus in the RC or Flight Hub 2. Drone deploy is also useful-ish. I would definitely say minimum of 70%, 80% side and side is best. So if you can do 80-80 front and side, that's the best. Minimum would be 70 and 80 as far as side and front overlap for your mapping and your orthomosaic. And you want to make sure that you're taking both infrared and RGB at the same time, even if it's nighttime. It really helps with, if there is a thermal anomaly or a thermal difference, having the RGB, even if you do it during the day beforehand, but having an RGB picture ahead of time is very good to be able to say, okay, that thermal anomaly is X, or that thermal anomaly isn't anything, it's actually a vent. And here's the proof. Okay. So it's really good to have side by side. Flight pattern, you want to use grid patterns or a crosshatch, and you want to be perpendicular to the surface. Pipelines and power lines, you want to do corridors. Focus, you want to make sure that you check your focus regularly. There is an FFC button on the remote. Hit that before, like when you take off, gimbal down, or right before you take off, hit FFC. It focuses your thermal camera. Use that and use it often. So that way you're always keeping the focus of the thermal images accurate. You want to make sure that you're setting your distance from where the drone is taking the picture to the surface. That is a setting in your RC. Right above emissivity, which you can change, it is defaulted to 0.95, which is most surfaces, so that's good. But right next to that on the DJI remote, you have emissivity and then you have distance to surface. So if you're doing like a residential capture or something like that, you might be 12 to 15 feet off of the sloped roof. But if you're doing a large commercial roof, you might be 50 feet off of the roof. So make sure that your distance and your emissivity is set correctly. And that way you're going to be able to get accurate photos, and then make sure that you're keeping the FFC or the focus going throughout the flight. That way you have in focus really good imagery. Palette selection. What colors should I use? Doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. But you want to have consistent color palettes. I usually choose iron bow or that purple to red to yellow for solar, for electrical, because you can see the hot spots easier. I'm also used to white hot or black hot, which is your normal or traditional thermal imagery. If you're using Arctic or rainbow or stuff like that, it's colorful, yeah, but it's all about, okay, what are the differences in the levels of temperatures? That's what those differences in color palette mean. There's no real need to have it one versus the other, but consistency within your project is key. Like, you don't want to have 30 photos of iron bow, 30 photos of white hot, and 30 photos. Like, don't be playing around with the just set it and leave it like that. I have a couple different contractors I work with. One of them wants rainbow for solar inspections, and the other one wants fugarite or iron bow, lava red for their color palette. So it's really just what's best for their system, their analysis, and consistency. Level and span, okay, your temperature range. Basically, we were talking about this earlier, but you want to make sure that you're adjusting to maximize the contrast on target without saturating the sensor. So basically, if you know that the surroundings of the roof and the target that you're looking at are, say, ground temperature and say 40 degrees, 50 degrees or less, and then the roof surface that you're looking at is probably 70 to 150 degrees temperature, you can set that span of, say, 60 to 170 degrees, and it will focus on the roof and it will ignore the color palette for the ground temperatures. Okay. I can also do that on the back end of adjusting what the color temperature is, the span. But the benefit there is that way you're not wasting half of your color palette on the ground, and then the roof surface subject wise is just orange through yellow. It's all hot looking. Okay. And don't rely on just auto everything for your critical tasks. Make sure you double check a lot of these. Okay. Emissivity. This is, if you're set correctly, okay, your quantitative data is, set correctly if quantitative data is what you're looking for. Like, if you're looking for basically how much temperature, what is the temperature of this spot, of this spot, of this spot, you want to make sure that the emissivity, or how much thermal expulsion that surface, that TPO or whatever that surface membrane is, you want to make sure that, like, if it's a brick versus steel, you want to set that emissivity correctly. Usually it defaults to 0.95, so that's usually good anyway. And for your general qualitative, where we're looking for thermal differences, that's fine. Document that setting though. Make sure that you always, like, say, okay, this is what we had it set to. Now, we're all familiar with JPEG and we're all familiar with DNG or RAW. This is radiometric, not raw JPEG. Okay. So in your thermal settings, make sure you have radiometric JPEGs, not just JPEGs. Why? Standard JPEGs only record the video, the color. There's no temperature ranges to those different pixels. Your radiometric will have a temperature data for every single pixel. Basically, this allows that post-flight analysis. Something that I've run into quite often with this little issue is if I have a drone pilot sending me the images, if they send it to me via Google Drive, I get the JPEGs. If you send it to me via a SD card or a USB or Dropbox, all of the metadata is sent with it, and then I actually get the R JPEG or the radiometric JPEG. And then your visual data, always capture the corresponding visual or RGB photos for context and correlation of what are those anomalies and what could they be. And most of your drones will do this side by side. All right, so now we've talked about pretty much everything, but how do you make money off of it? How do you actually bring this to market? Where's the value? All right, so data and deliverables, all right, turning that data into actionable insights for the clientele that you're talking to. Software that could be used or is used very often. FLIR is like the thermal infrared company. That's where the Predator drones and the big ball turret cameras that you see underneath the drones, FLIR is the one that makes those. DJI thermal analysis tool. It's a free software. It is very manual. It doesn't take the entire set and put it into a nice ortho mosaic and then say, okay, here's all the annotations and here's all of where you have issues. Third-party platforms are usually where you go to put all of those analytical stuff into a clean report, but you have to pay for that kind of stuff. So Drone Deploy Thermal, Raptor Maps for solar, those are going to be your third-party platforms that do thermal analysis and reporting very well. I'm sure there are a lot of other ones, and I would love to hear options and collaborate. But so far, that's what I've found as being the best and easiest. I mean, there's definitely ones that are more precise, but they're not as easy, vice versa. Analysis process, basically reviewing the thermal and visual data together, saying, okay, this is a shadow caused by a tree, and that's not an issue, versus this is a big wet spot that is still hot at night. That's a thermal issue. And basically, we want to identify or annotate in our reports, okay, what could be an anomaly as far as different reflection, solar loading, heating, all that kind of stuff, and provide those analytics to the clientele using software like spot meters, area boxes, like basically with a radiometric JPEG, I can click on a pixel and it will tell me what the temperature was for that pixel. Or I could draw a box around an area and it will tell me what the average temperature is, the highest temperature is, and the lowest temperature is, and it will tell me where those spots are in that box. So those are things that you can do with the radiometric analysis. You can also measure temperatures if they're appropriate to, say, manufacturer specs. So in automotive, okay, you want to make sure that your car is running at an X amount of temperature, or you're going to start melting pieces like gears, motors, all that kind of stuff. You can use a thermal camera to say, hey, you forgot to put oil in this thing and it's running at 500 degrees. You're going to blow up your motor. I don't know anybody that has done that. Geolocate findings using GPS data. That's also part of the metadata. And the reason that's really important is if you have fields and fields and fields of solar, it's great that you have pictures to show that there are issues, but where are these issues? That is very important. Okay. And then turning that data into reports. Basically, your reports are going to be the key deliverable. This is what's going to the client customer. You want to have clear, summaries of findings, including pictures. So say on your ortho mosaic, it's one big picture image of a lot of different images. That's the mosaic part. The annotations are going to be on your mosaic, but then you could also use all of the different pictures referenced to that spot for exact analysis as far as your thermal. Your methodology, you want to also always, like I said, you always want to document the emissivity, the distance, your flight paths, all that kind of stuff, so that if your client goes, can you prove this? You can say, here's all the math behind it, basically. That way, when you have all the conditions and the equipment and the flight path, you can say, hey, these are the expected results, and this matches to it, or the margin of error is 0.x plus or minus. Annotated thermal and visual images side by side for each finding. Okay. And then location, a map or orthomosaic showing where those issues are. So same thing, like I was saying, on a solar field, but say you have a big solar system on a roof. You want to be able to say, okay, row 10, panel 15 has this issue. Okay. And then you want to set a severity assessment. Like, is this going to be something that needs to be taken care of right now? Is it medium important? Is it just an observation? Okay. And then the key thing is, we're not experts in every single field. We understand thermal imagery, okay, but we're not necessarily experts in roofing. If you have Hague certification, which is a very rare thing in roofing, okay, then you're a roofing expert. If you have NABCEP certification with solar, then yeah, you can most likely be considered a solar expert. Same thing with electrical, like if you have your electrical license. But most of what we are doing is saying, this is what we have found, and we recommend further investigation, okay, by a qualified roofer or electrician. So, for example, if I were to find a wet spot in a roof, I'm going to annotate that as a high issue, because I know those leak issues are high priorities. But I'm going to say, okay, this is a potential or possible roof in moisture intrusion or leak. I recommend physical or destructive core sample testing to confirm if it is a leak or a water intrusion. So basically, the roofer is going to go out there and take a sample of that roof little spot and see if there's moisture down below the surface to confirm what we have annotated. Okay. But we don't want to go and step on the roofer's feet and go, we know more about roofing than you do. And they're going to go, no, the hell you don't. Well, you haven't been on a roof for 20 years. And I don't want to be on a roof for 20 years. Okay. I want to be able to be more efficient and provide more benefits to the roofers faster and more efficiently, safer, and give more deliverables, actionables value to the roofers through drones. Okay, so we are not going to be sitting there going, hey, roofer, we know more than you. This is a recommendation. This is where we've noticed. Here are the annotations, and this is where you should test to go further. That way you're having a very synergistic relationship with your clients versus argumentative. And here is a case study, and this is one that I have done personally. Basically, this is Key Cargo. It was a solar system that we installed in 2015, I believe it was when it was installed. And we inspected it in 2023. There are a little over 1,800 panels on the roof here. And if you were to have an electrician, I know this because Warren, our electrician, was going around on this roof, and after about the third week, he had gotten past maybe one of these sections. So I'm like, hey, I could do that. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. It took me a total of 10 minutes to drive from the office to the location, set up, fly the route, and then drive back to the office. Very close to the office, but the flight was a total of 4 minutes versus months. On the right or on the left over here, it basically gave me a prioritized anomaly graph, the amount of occurrences or amount of modules affected by it. And then we also have the amount of electricity that is reduced or affected by those anomalies, and the total DC rating percentage for the system. How much is of this total system is this affecting? And then the estimated impact for 1 year of not doing anything with these anomalies. And okay, so you have electricity, and we know what the electricity cost is around this area. So we can then say, okay, the estimated amount in impact per anomaly in a dollar amount for that first year. So in the first column, we have cracking. There's 2 occurrences of cracking. It really doesn't affect much. It's 0.09% of the total system, and it's going to affect $52. That is not much for the total amount for the entire system. But when we get down to the bottom, these 3, okay, we have potential optimizer issues, 19. We have strings, there are 7, but that's affecting 205 panels, okay? And underperforming strings, there are 2, which is 58 panels. So we're looking at a total of $991 missing, $5,300 missing, and $1,513 missing production if they do not fix these issues. So total missing production is $8,734. It cost them all of $3,000 plus I would say about $3,500 for the drone flight, inspection, and repair of this roof. So it actually made them more energy in the first year after repair than the cost of the repair. So that it basically paid for itself within 6 months. On the other side of it is, now that you know where all the issues are, you got to do something with it. Okay. So what we're looking at here is the solar system. Okay. The top image is the top half, and the bottom image is the bottom half. And it is annotated by row and by panel and by anomaly. So these big green lines are strings. The pink and the blue are small things that aren't very common. The light blue up here is your cracking on a panel. Okay. That's only 1 or 2 panels. But then your underperforming string is that big one right there. So where were there big issues in these 2 areas? Where were we going to send our crew? We were going to focus on this area and these areas up here. Very easy, okay, versus hunting and pecking would be the other alternative. The old alternative would be with either a FLIR camera, an infrared camera, or with a plus and a minus electrical meter and testing each panel. That's very slow and cumbersome. So overall, this made it so much faster. It made repairing the system much faster, and we were able to prioritize the biggest issues over the smaller issues. So overall, I believe that, oh, the last part that I have is what are some examples of thermal anomalies in solar panels specifically. This is easy. Cracking, basically the glass is cracked and you're going to have a difference between the amount of light getting through versus a non-cracked solar panel. A diode is going to be one section, basically where the positive goes up and then comes down to the negative. That's the diode. Diode multi is going to be two different sections or more. Okay. Then you have internal short circuits. That's these little hot spots. That's like the wiring from one little cell to the next little cell has a crack in it, and you have electricity heating up those little cells. Or you have an entire solar panel module that's messed up. And then you have this one where it's the entire string is messed up. So you can see how different levels of anomalies affect different amounts of solar panels. Same thing in roofing and all that. There are different types of anomalies. So we'll go into those in a bigger, further deep dive later on, and we'll build out each one specific to different industries. But overall, I believe we are now at about an hour and a half. So I wanted to open this up and end with Q&A, comments, and get your feedback as far as just give you an open forum to ask questions. And Meyer, you can take over.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been a commercial roofing project manager for over 50 years. So any helpful use I can be to you guys, feel free to ask.
For sure. So I'm trying to understand what that question is. I work primary in telecom industry and would like to explore this in that sector. So as far as that industry, I have worked with FP&L here in Florida last year for Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. And basically what they had me doing they have gray sky and they have blue sky. Blue sky is when there's not a problem, like when there's no storm and they're just doing like maintenance kind of stuff or whatever. Gray sky is like there's a storm, and with Hurricane Helene, they had me going out to different areas. It didn't matter if it was RGB or thermal, but they wanted me to be out in the neighborhood looking for down power lines. And if it was thank you, Alejandro. the whatchamacallit, the like power lines being down, but hey, that line might go miles into the woods, or it goes into the woods, but then it goes left and then right and then left. For the line crew, the linemen, sometimes getting out to those lines are not easy. There's vegetation on the ground, there's tree coverage right above it. It's not like your normal, like right next to the road. So a lot of times they would have us going out ahead of time to find where you had down lines. Um, and basically you'd be the eyes ahead of time. With Hurricane Milton, I was doing a lot of solar field inspections, both on the environmental, like the fence lines and the irrigation lines or lanes and stuff like that, to make sure that there wasn't any issues as far as wildlife getting in or water intrusions as far as the fields. There were some solar fields that were flooded to halfway up the solar panel, and the entire field was screwed because it was saltwater. There was also some tornadoes that ripped up entire sections of solar panels. So that was really, really effective. For blue sky stuff, what they had me doing with like the lines and the transmission stuff, I hate it, but it's really, really good work. You have to take an overhead shot and then at 4 quadrants. So uh, basically 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you're taking infrared and visual at the same time. So you're taking a total of 10 photos for every single pole. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of poles. Next time you go for a drive, just count how many poles there are in like a mile. There's a lot. And then just imagine you're circling every single line or pole. You get really dizzy after 10 hours of flight. That's telecom and your utility stuff. Cell towers and stuff, you'll do the very similar up and down, up and down. Does that answer your question? Who was that? Fernando? Cool. Um, Alejandro, really useful court. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. In personal opinion, to start in thermal, Mavic 3T or Matrice, they're pretty close in price. If you can get your hands on them right now, that's really the hard part. Mavic 3T, Matrice 4T, they're going to be under $10,000 or around. I don't know what the tariffs are right now, but your M30Ts, or Matrice 30Ts and 300s are going to be north of 15,000, 20,000. So I would say if you can get the Matrice 4T, do it, because there is a low infrared light along with the infrared camera. It has a built-in RTK unit, which is another $750, but that gives you 2 different GPS locations on your one drone, and will give you centimeter level or lower GSD, or ground sample distance. I think somebody else will teach about mapping. Thank you for your time, guys, and thanks for hearing me out. Not falling asleep. Definitely.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.